wrap up. I'll now recognize Mr. Bognet for 5 minutes for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you to all members of the committee for having me today. My name is Jim Bognet. I live in Hazel Township, Pennsylvania in Luzerne County. I was the Republican nominee for Congress in 2022 in Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District. The general election, which took place in Luzerne County on November 8, 2022, was a complete disaster. The gross incompetence of the Election Bureau brought national shame on Luzerne County. The most common statement heard from voters in the press was, "How do you run out of paper at the polls?" Most importantly, many Luzerne County voters were disenfranchised through no fault of their own, and some voters still do not know if their votes were counted. The problems began early on election morning as we received calls saying that polling places across the county had run out of paper on which votes are recorded from the voting machines and fed by voters into the tabulators, which completes the submission of each vote. Voters were turned away from the polls and told to come back later or asked to submit provisional or alternative ballots, which many voters refused to do. Some voters got out of line and left in disgust, and it's impossible to calculate how many left the polls. Others were asked to leave their phone numbers and told they would be called when the county workers provided more paper hours later. We heard from at least a dozen polling places that voters were being turned away and denied their right to vote. The paper shortage was widespread. The County Election Bureau had a giant whiteboard filled with the names of many precincts which ran out of paper or where other issues occurred, and this is that whiteboard. I believe it's been entered into evidence. By early afternoon, it was clear that many polling places across Luzerne County, the polls were closed on Election Day for hours at a time. Luzerne County took the extraordinary step of going to court and asking a judge to order that the voting period be extended from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. across the county due to the unprecedented closing of the polls. Our campaign agreed to support this because we wanted to make sure every lawful voter had a chance to vote. Stop for a minute and consider how extraordinary this is. On Election Day, with a governor, Senate, and 2 congressional races, as well as many local races occurring, Luzerne County had to walk into a judge's chamber and admit that polling places were effectively closed and had no paper to record votes on. In Luzerne County, the polls were closed on Election Day, disenfranchising voters. I spoke over the weekend with Eugene Doherty, an 84-year-old citizen of Hazel in Pennsylvania. He went to vote at 8:09 p.m. He was told that they'd be open till 10 p.m. The election worker had went home, closed the polls. She didn't have childcare. Him and his wife did not have a chance to vote. In the aftermath of the Election Day fiasco, Luzerne County tried to cover up the incredible mistakes that were made. Rather than take responsibility for what had happened, as the ranking member suggested, County Manager Randy Robertson announced that evening that he was resigning for quote-unquote personal reasons. He's never answered a question. Denise Williams, the head of the election board, allowed public comment at hearings, but flatly refused to answer any questions put to her. In fact, Ms. Williams admonished voters for directing questions toward the board and refused to provide any information about the paper shortage. At an open canvassing hearing the day after the election, the acting head of the Luzerne County Bureau of Elections, Beth McBride, an elected Democrat city councilwoman in Wilkes-Barre, refused to answer any questions from the press or public. No explanation was provided for the paper shortage. The Luzerne County administration has done everything in their power to deny responsibility and evade accountability for the disastrous election they administered. Many voters attended an election board meeting on November 14th to express their outrage. Citizens were not provided with any answers as to who was responsible for ordering the paper for the polling places. Election Bureau head Beth McBride was present and asked many times whose responsibility it was to order the ballot paper, but she refused to answer questions. We are left with one of 2 inescapable conclusions. Either Luzerne County election administrators forgot to order and provide paper to all polling locations, or Luzerne County election administrators purposely did not provide enough paper to over 40 polling locations. No one here present today can answer which of those 2 things happened, for only the election administrators, McBride and Williams, can provide these answers. Both of these officials have refused your committee's request to testify. Voters across Luzerne County have called me and expressed their outrage that 4.5 months later, election officials still won't answer questions. My goal in testifying today is to ask that all the facts be brought to light and responsible officials be compelled to testify in public under oath. And we make whatever changes are necessary to ensure this never happens again. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and the conduct of elections in Luzerne County need to be cleaned up completely. Our right to vote is sacred. My grandparents served in World War II to fight for our freedom and right to vote. My grandfather was an Italian immigrant, came through Ellis Island. He told me he never missed an election in Luzerne County. We must restore faith in fair elections among voters of all parties. I believe this can only be done through your thorough congressional investigation. Thank you.